Hey everyone, I just got done having a discussion with legendary football coach Tim Goodwin, and I got to say this episode has so much good information from Tim. Definitely check it out. We talk about his upbringing, kind of how his upbringing influenced him being around football, just the fun of football and all the elements of football that make it so fun for him, and really what his success formula has been, because he has definitely had a lot of success, as you'll hear, both leading in the football field and from a principal and classroom perspective, and really how to think about short-term success and long-term success. He talked a lot about leadership and engagement and engaging players, engaging other coaches, and delegating, and how hard that is, but how rewarding it is. We got into a deep discussion on the meaning of life and the three big questions that everyone should be asking themselves, which was really, really impactful. Tim talked about being content, but also being on a mission. And I think there's two different parts of the episode that kind of came together naturally, but it's a really important thing because I think we're always trying to figure out contentment and, being on a mission and how do we pick and choose those. And Tim was really helpful with that. So really encourage you to check this one out. This is a fantastic discussion. Tim Goodwin. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. Tim Goodwin. Tim, how are you doing today?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, I get to spend a lot of time with Tim. So Tim, if you don't know who Tim Goodwin is, you need to know. But, where I'm from, Marion Local Schools, he is our, first of all, he's our principal, which is less talked about perhaps. But I'll start there because he has had a big part, and he's part of a great administration and teaching staff, and he's our principal for our high school. But, recently, number one on the state test scores out of 750 schools. So I'm just going to start with that because that's remarkable and takes a lot of teamwork at the leadership level that you're a part of. And then also, not to overlook, of course, Tim, most of you know him as the high school coach for the Marion Local Flyers, which, as we stand today, and I'm sure this will change, but he's been the coach there since 1999, 15 state titles. So most state titles in Ohio high school history. Around 320 wins, 324 wins, I think, and counting. 64 straight wins. Just graduated a phenomenal senior class that Tim led and had great success. And just leading, I think, in the right way. And I want to talk a lot about that and what it takes and how that leadership has evolved, why you're doing it. But before we get into some of those things, Tim, tell us a little bit about the backstory and just what brought you to coaching? What brought you to Marion Local? Why are you doing what you're doing?
Okay. Both of my parents were educators. My dad was a history teacher. Then he became a high school principal as well. My mom was a elementary teacher and guidance counselor, and my dad was a football coach. So I grew up. Our social calendar was the school. Extracurricular events. We were at concerts, plays, sporting events. That was just how I grew up. And my parents always talked positive about people and education. And I saw, like the relationships they built with, the people they worked with and the students, and how this, and especially I think in the older I get, I really appreciate, running up on students when they're older and just talking to them and checking in with them and seeing how life's going. And it's just really fun. But I got to witness that when I was growing up. And like I said, two positive people. You can have negative people, talk about this or that in any profession, I'm sure. But my parents were just positive, and that rubbed off on me. And I love football, always have loved football. And I love all parts of football, actually. And so it was just a natural thing for me to get into. We were successful. I'm just very fortunate. Like, my high school program was successful. We just won. I went to college at the University of Findlay. Very special place. I think still, but especially at that time, just the family atmosphere of that place. And I tell this story all the time. My head coach, Dick Strom, is 90 years old, and he's still keeping track of me and the Marion Local Flyers, and calls me up, before a big game, and it's just cool. And we won at Findlay, and I was, just part of that. I wasn't a great player by any stretch, but I was part of it, and I got to see, just how how it works. And so I got into teaching and coaching right out of college at Bluffton High School. So myself and my college roommate, we just stayed in Findlay. He got a job in Findlay, and I drove from Findlay to Bluffton. I learned a lot coaching and teaching at Bluffton, and just that was a big experience for me. So, saw a job, come open at Marion Local. And to be honest, Phil, like I had heard of Marion Local because I was in the Lima area. So, Marion Local was covered by the Lima media. So I'd heard of it, but I don't think I'd ever even set foot in the Mercer County before.
If you blink, you'll miss it. If you'll blink, you'll miss it, right?
Like, we were going up and down I-75 to Dayton and Cincinnati, to ball games or what have you, but like we never got off the interstate and traveled west, so.
You really didn't know what you were getting into.
Not at all.
And we'll talk about that. I want to come back, Tim, just before. I don't want to gloss over something you said. Is you said football, and you love a lot of different elements of football. Like if you were to break that down in like there's 2 or 3. I'm suspecting like strategic, technical, and like mindset or something like that. But what are those items that you love about football? What are the couple of them that you just, man, this makes this fun?
Well, I think just the team aspect of football, I think, is unique. You just have some positions on the football field. Like, I don't think you have in other sports, Phil. Like, there's guys on the football field that are never going to touch the ball, and their only job is to make their teammates successful. That's their only job, and that's the offensive line, and that's what I played. And I don't know of any other sport where that's your only job. In baseball, you get to hit, and in basketball, you eventually get the ball. Your coach may not let you shoot it, but, you get to touch it. And so I love that part of football. Obviously, as a coach, there's 11 guys out there, a lot of moving parts, a lot of strategy, a lot of, just that kind of, for a guy that enjoys, like strategy and math and like, how can we gain just a little bit of an advantage here or there? And then just, multiply that advantage by repeating, you just find a little edge somewhere and then you just hammer it and you just repeat. So that intrigues me. But just the teams are bigger, so there's a lot of dynamic there. The coaching staffs are bigger. I coached baseball when I was a young guy at Bluffton, and like you're the lone wolf. You're just out there doing your own thing. But I didn't really like that. I mean, I would much rather have people around me that we're all working together for a shared goal, and that's really what I love doing is trying to see if we, and I think, Phil, we're probably you talked about the school, but I think the unique part about Marion Local is our community has tremendous alignment. I feel the whole community, the community, the school, and all the pieces of that are just aligned, like we have shared goals, visions. Like for the school, we're going to do things, and, whether it's facilities, programs, investment, you understand that from your side of like, we're going to do things that's going to benefit our kids.
Yeah.
And,
you know what's interesting is I think this is such an important topic I think the community, when you really step back and you think about the big picture, is always aligned. The tactics and how to get there and the strategies, there's disagreement, there's debate, there's dialogue. Like, hey, but when we step back and think about the end goal and what we're trying to achieve, and we're just trying, we're trying to make good kids or whatever it might be, we're aligned on that. And if you're aligned on the bigger goal and you know where you're going, it makes, it puts things in perspective, and we don't get every single decision right. I'm sure you've made plenty of mistakes, a lot of bad decisions, but you course correct and you redirect when you know what the end goal is. So I like that a lot. I like just that thought process. I am not going to let you sit here though today and say that the reason the football program and the school is so successful is just because of the community and the kids, and that you don't play a part in that. You're going to try to be humble on me, and I told you beforehand. But I want to talk about coaching and the success, because you come in 1999, right, into Marion Local, And we were, 500 team probably for a lot of years. And that changed pretty dramatically and pretty quickly. So what did you come in? What did you see? And what was the success formula then? And how has that evolved to, 25 years later?
Yeah, I mean, it's always evolving, which is fun. Like I wouldn't keep doing this if we were just doing the same things over and over and just throw it out. All right, we'll throw it out there. We'll do the same stuff. And, if we have the kids this year, we'll be fine. If not, well, maybe, we'll get them next year. Like that has never interested me at all. Like, so yeah, we're always refining, but I think, and I've said this, at some of my talks, like it's part of your culture. And I think for a football coach, there's a lot of aspects to culture that I don't think that the other coaches necessarily equate with how I do with culture. Like part of our culture is like myself, starting with myself, but obviously I've built a great staff. We are going to do everything we can to help our kids be successful. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And you have to adapt on the fly. I've seen this over and over, Phil, like through the years. Like, for example, like I've seen I've seen teams run plays at our best players. Okay. Like, and I would just watch that play develop. And I'm like, Marion Local would never even run that play at that kid, at that opponent, and then they do this during the game. And then, we're very fortunate in our area. We have a lot of media coverage, which is kind of unusual for high school, I think, in a lot of areas,
Yep. Interesting.
But then you read the quotes in the papers, like, the other coach will say things, oh, we got to execute better. We got to get stronger. We got to get faster. I was like, well, yeah, I don't disagree with you, but like you just ran that play at a kid, our best player, you did not give your team a shot. And I think that's part of culture that gets overlooked, like I said. And like that's where I think I can have an impact. Like I think we do a great job of putting our kids in the best possible spots, and giving them little advantages and play into our strengths, like I said, and I think that just accumulates, and people work harder, people are happier,
Is the strategy, if we talk about the strategy element of the game, is the strategy that complex, or is it simpler than that, where we're like, is it okay, like we're going to this is the team we have and we're going to build around that and we're going to have all these different options and plays, and I heard you talking about this, or is it no, like we see a weakness and we're going to exploit that and we're going to keep it simple and we're just going to execute once we know what that is? Like how many layers deep is the strategy part of the game?
Right. And that's interesting you've asked that, because here's the deal, Phil. Like if you watch us play, you would say, oh, that's just a simple play, okay? And there's nothing complicated about it. There's nothing fancy about it. But people don't understand that maybe there were 2 or 3 simple plays that were part of the option. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And like we have little tweaks within our system that give us a better chance of success.
Right.
And it doesn't look like anything, but you don't know what's going on behind it. And it's not complicated, but I think we do a good job of simplifying things. And I think, that's my job as a coach, as an educator. Like how many meetings have you went to where people try to impress you with big words or jargon or, and I'm like, just simplify. That's your job, is to simplify that and teach me. And you're doing a terrible job of it.
Right. Well, and I think the other part of that is, so you talked about putting the kids in the best position to win. And there's strategic elements of that too. But some of that is hard conversations, difficult situations. I've heard a lot. There's a lot. We talk a lot about this. So I didn't mention this, but Tim is our high school principal. I sit on our school board locally. So we interact a lot in that regard. But just the standards that we have. And look, there are discussions about standards and if they should change. But at the end of the day, I've heard, the standard is the standard. So tell me more about that and how, especially as, the culture has changes over time, 25 years ago to today, like kids are changing, maybe slower in our area than others, which I think is probably a good thing. But as they change, do the standards change? Do we adapt? Tell me more about standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a talk in itself, but I mean, there's a lot that kind of goes behind the scenes. Yeah, I think it is my job to hold the standard, as the leader of, whatever organization. But there's a lot of ways to hold it up. And I think the older I get, like, it's way more effective if you can come from an understanding of respect, like love, like we have this relationship. We're going to have some hard conversations. But in the end, that I respect you. I want what's best for you. Like, this is just football, if we're talking about football right now. So I think that always has to be the base, Phil. Like, people have to know that you genuinely care. Like, you're not transactional, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think there's such an important element.
Base.
I mean, if you haven't seen Tim coach or just been around him, I mean, there's a directness to you that is like, people know where you stand, I think, right? First of all, I think the team knows what the standards and the expectations are, and then they know where you stand. And if there's something that goes on, I think a player is going to know that is not within the standard, or they're going to be corrected. This isn't a soft, like culture, I guess, when you're building culture, this is not a soft, fluffy word. This is like, there's an expectation here. It is going to be hard. We are going to be tough on you because this is the standard we're setting. And if we want to win, which is the goal within the season, of course, we want to win, then these are the expectations. You got to hold people accountable. And talk maybe a little bit about that. Like, what are the core values that the team has, or that you really try to reinforce with the players, that maybe come from the community? And I'm not saying this is not the only part of the formula of success, because before you came, I think a lot of this, the culture and the community in the area, it didn't change when you came here, right? But how you took the players in and adapted it, something clearly did change. But tell me the importance of that in, like, just the community, the culture, work ethic, discipline. What are the biggest things that you think stand out for the area? And I don't think this is Marion Local. I think the other schools in our area have this too. They just haven't figured all the pieces out. But what are those things that, man, these really stand out? And in addition to having good leadership, coaching, strategy, this is why these players can succeed.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it has to start from the respect aspect, the care. I'm not here just to extract value from you and throw you away. That has to be there, and whatever way you do it. We have an FCA here. I might as well bring that up here. The Fellowship of Christian Athletes that I'm involved with. Like, I try to, I'm a sinner and I'm not perfect, but I try to live out my faith, and I try to help kids maybe grow in their faith through the FCA. So that's part of it. Obviously not all the football kids go there, and there's a lot of other kids that do go, but that's part of it. But hitting on the other piece, like I'm going to help them be successful, which I think is part of it. And our coaches are going to help them be successful. And what happens when everyone wants to be successful, right, Phil? And what happens? You gain momentum. People are more willing to sacrifice, more willing to do what you ask them. And I think that's part of the puzzle as well. Phil, as a high school principal, one thing that fascinates me is just dynamics within classes. Okay. And, in terms of like a teacher's class and a whole grade, the dynamic, but I watch groups of kids in one class, and the teacher's doing amazing with them, and the kids are working hard. There's a positive energy in the class, and then I can see kind of the same core of kids in a different class, and there's not that same thing. And like I said, the core of the kids is the same, but there's more complaining going on. There's more, just negative energy. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Yep. So that fascinates me watching that. And I was like, so what's the difference between room A and room B?
Right.
It's the leader in there and just the culture that's been created. And I think a lot of it is, are we going to work together? And, the older I get, like, are we going to work together and work alongside, as the leader? I'm going to be next to you instead of in front of you, with a red pen or a stopwatch or whatever. No, I'm going to be right next to you, helping you along the way, course correcting, like you said.
Yeah. So let's talk about leadership a little bit more, but I want to talk about coaching staff, because you had a coaching staff in place when you came here, a lot of great guys, a lot of knowledge, but probably some things that need to be built upon, I'm sure. And that has evolved now where you some of those guys are still around, but also players have come in and it's changed. So tell me about your approach to engaging your other coaches.
It's been it's been great, but it's been very hard. I told a group of people like a month or two ago, like, I think the hardest thing I've done in coaching is stepping back in some ways and letting other coaches do some things that, 15 years ago I was doing. And, and there's going to be mistakes made, that I made, earlier on. But it's also very fun. Just this morning, we had workouts, and a part of the workout, we go out on the field and work on our pass game. And so Adam Berkey was out there working with the quarterback. So he had the varsity team, and I just took the freshmen and did some things with the freshmen, some basic stuff. But, it's just that, like, I gave Adam the varsity guys, and
right.
And it was fun. Like, he does a great job, and I have it right now. Like, it's probably the happiest I've ever been coaching because of the coaches that I'm with.
And it's hard to do that the first time, like to let go of the thing the first time, but then it's rewarding when you start to see the leaders under you that are leading that and being successful. And honestly, it's, when they start it, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to do it differently, or they're just going to do it different than you. And maybe It's not even a mistake. It's just, that's not how you would do it, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong, right? There's different ways to get the same thing done. So, I think that's an important lesson, is even trying to just, sometimes I think I guess this is maybe me speaking, but I think our ego gets in the way to say, like, oh, I know how to do this and we need to do this. And then but if we want to grow and even just do more strategic things and like have a bigger impact, we have to step back from those things and delegate and just let the next level start to make some of those mistakes. Because if we don't, we're just going to be doing the same thing over and over again. And we can't have 15 championships if we think like that. So, I want to talk about, so you talked about success and like the definition of success. So, and, clearly within a season, you're going to have goals around winning and, what the team does within that season. But how do you think about your goals, like for you personally, from a short term, I'll just say short term, like one season perspective versus longer term, and even, I'll start there. I might have some follow-ups, but how do you think about your short-term goals and long-term goals for the team and for the program?
Yeah, everyone approaches this differently. We always have a motto every year of being humble and working hard. And, so obviously modeling that, encouraging that. You talked about the standard as the standard. And one thing I've learned over the years is, what the best way that I've found to encourage that is just when you see examples of it, just praise the heck out of it in front of everyone, and I try to do that as much as I can. When I see it, it's like, all right, this kid did this, and I pointed out to the whole team at the end of practice. All right. So that's always part of my goal, is to model that, to encourage that. I don't think you can ever have enough people around you that are humble and work hard. Obviously, football wise, specifically, like my biggest goal and impact as a coach on the field is like, do we see improvement? And I think that's coaching. Like, I think that's where coaching. So if you see, a team that really improves throughout the year, I think the coaches are doing a good job, wherever they started at. And I think if you see teams that consistently don't, or, plateau out, I think that's a reflection on coaching. So my most miserable times as I reflect on coaching is when I felt a team hit the wall and we could not go any further. And sometimes it's by injury, in November. And
Yep.
What happens in football is, you get to a certain point where the injuries pile up, and the kids at Marion Local are tough and they're going to play, but they might not be able to practice. And guess what?
Right.
Practice is important, and
Yeah.
like we're not going to improve if we can't get, our guys practicing together. So that's one thing. But other times, I've just had a couple teams that, for whatever reason, my style and their style didn't mesh, and we just could not get any further. And I was just miserable. So for me, I think the growth throughout the season is really my biggest joy in terms of, pure football.
And how much change do you see from, the kids you take in, within a season, you see kids grow, but from when you're taking in, scrawny little freshmen to grown men as seniors, right? And you're seeing them grow up throughout high school. And obviously football knowledge and like just experience and that stuff is one thing, but just how neat is it to see, especially a kid that maybe plays at a young age, but they're just immature or not, just figuring themselves out. I guess, how rewarding is that? And even what role do you have, or what role do you play in kind of their growth?
Yeah, well, obviously, it is a cool part of their life, I think, just as a male, because you are maturing physically. Then you throw in, our workout aspect that, accelerates that, hopefully. But it's cool to see. And I think I was just talking to one of my daughters, like, I don't know what it about, but like, yeah, it's just the typical Marion Local freshman. Like, I think people just think we're always monsters, and just like bigger. I'm like, no, the typical Marion Local freshman, and you said it, is like a scrawny 120-pound kid,
Right.
And they just grow and develop, and it is so much fun to be a part of that. And, that's a big part of our program.
Yeah. So you mentioned the FCA, and I want to talk about just, general success, not within the program, but like I talked about, community, but like whether the kids are participating in the FCA or not, what role do you think because the question is going to be, what role do you think faith and family play in success? But before you jump into that from a football program perspective, in my opinion, and this message can be someone from our area or anywhere throughout the United States, but our area of businesses, our area of success, our area of education, number one in the state with not a lot of resources. We don't have all these fancy resources at our school and all kind. Like, this is just people caring. This is, parents. This is kids that give a, like, it's not because of all of the resources we have, but you just see this everywhere in our businesses. Like, the more I talk to different business owners, I'm like, you do business throughout the world, and you like, oh my, like, there's so much success. And I just think there's such an opportunity to help. Like, my goal is to help those businesses learn more, get better, and be more successful if we can, because I think people from our area, I think bringing attention to Marion Local football program and to Tim Goodwin, who had at his core faith and family matters, is a good thing. And I think the more people around here can be successful in whatever they do, football, basketball, volleyball, sports, you name it, business, whatever it might be, I think the more success we have, the more of an impact we can have. So, but tell me, not only can we have that impact and pass it on, hopefully, and have an impact, but how much has the core of it, faith and family, impacted the success in the first place?
Yeah. Very, very good points that you brought up there. And, we're certainly successful in way more than just football, like you said. And, I'm happy to watch that as well. But, I'm a Christian, and I think we were created in God's image. Okay. So I think that people cannot be ever satisfied or content or having a purpose in their life without that aspect that fulfills you, because I believe we were created with that hole in us that is searching for the meaning of life, Phil, and so I think if you have the meaning of life figured out, which is right out there for you, if you want to read it, that's what I believe. Like, I think the other things are just small things. And they, when you have a person that has a purpose in life and knows, kind of the answers to the big questions. Like, I think there's 3 big questions, Phil, that we all need to answer. Like, where did I come from? And I'm not just talking about biology here, but like my soul, right? Like who I am, not just the DNA from my parents I'm talking about, right? And like, where did I come from? What am I supposed to do when I'm here? What am I doing? And what's going to happen to me when I die? I think those are the 3 big questions that people may not admit that they have those questions, but I think they do. And, I think when you have those answered by your faith, I think that my faith and God and Jesus as my Savior answers those 3 questions. Okay. And I think once you have that figured out, I think you just have a freedom, okay, and a basis to just skyrocket on things.
I just talked to John Wood recently. So John Wood is from Versailles. Eye doctor, moved to, he lives in Tiffin now, but I just interviewed him. He's doing phenomenal things, co-authored a book or published a book with Matthew Kelly. Like he speaks to all types of different reconciliation retreats. But he said there's just a couple of big questions. And there was 3 or 4, I forget. But like you guys, 2 different discussions a couple of days apart, so the exact same thing. And what is it founded in, basically? And the more you know that, and he talked about freedom, mission, like his book is Ordinary People, Extraordinary Missions. So just so many synergies. And just because I think the message is, it's 2 guys that I talked to that are very aligned and clear on what their faith is. That's why you can speak so confidently with that. So appreciate you sharing that and kind of being transparent about that, because I think it's so important. So the meaning of life is clear, and when you know what your purpose is, but how do you take the biggest purposes? Okay, so how do you take your biggest purposes, whatever that biggest purpose is, which I think we're probably aligned, but how do you take that to the football field? What does that mean? How are you aligning your job as a coach, your job as a principal, to be in alignment with your biggest purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a great alignment, just in, the 2 biggest commandments are to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and love others, So I think you can model that perfectly in those 2 roles that I have. And I don't do it perfect by any stretch of the imagination, Bill, but, like I said, I think it's just your approach and, how you react to certain things. And when I do screw up, I mean, you apologize, you have those one-on-one, conversations. That life is messy, it is. And,
yep.
And I'm just out here living it, just like everyone else, and doing my best. So yeah.
And I think as coaches, players, business leaders, business like managers in businesses, I think what's so important is, especially if you're a person of faith, is that you can serve people in so many different ways. And just like the job you have a lot of times can be the vehicle to have an impact, right? Like football is the mechanics, football is the tactics. Like and you're really good at it. And like the three different things you talked about earlier, like why you enjoy it so much. But like getting the team together and just showing the kids how to do things the right way and being an example, I think is so important. So no matter what you're doing, like there's you're working with people, right? You're working with people no matter what you're doing in some way, shape, or form. So there's an opportunity to have an impact no matter what you're doing, whether you have 15 state titles or you're whatever you're doing. There's just a lot of different ways. And if you're clear on what the biggest missions are and answering those three questions, I think it can be so helpful. So thanks for sharing that. I want you to just step back and just think about, your career, what you've done, the impact you've had. You've gone through good times, you've gone through bad times, you've seen the ups and downs. But if you step back and reflect, how does what you do, how does it make you feel?
I'm just happy. I'm content. Like, earlier in my career when I had some early success, I was the typical, now what's next? Do I move on, take bigger opportunities, and I didn't, obviously. And
Thank you.
I'm very happy that I didn't, just because I really think this is what I was meant to do. You ever just walk out, like, I think every year when this happens, like in July, when I'm walking out to an early season practice, like I just have this feeling like this is just what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm here for. Like, and I don't know if other people get that feeling, but I do. And so I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I do recognize, like I got a good thing here, and this really, really gives me joy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so.
And I think when you have the ultimate alignment and this is what you're supposed to be doing, I think that's the best feeling you can have. That does not mean you have that feeling all the time. That does
Correct.
not mean every moment when you're dealing with the BS and the crap or whatever you got to deal with, you always feel like that. And I think that's what people get confused with. It's like, oh, this is hard. It is hard. It's going to be hard. You're going to deal with stuff like you're dealing with 14 to 18-year-old men. By the way, if you're leading people and you're dealing with 20 to 40-year-old people, you're dealing with stuff, or whatever it is. You're dealing with because it's people, it's humans. We're all broken. Like we all have issues and challenges. But if you can step back and really reflect and see like this, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing, I think that's a phenomenal feeling for everyone. So I appreciate you sharing that. When you think about the next 25 years of coaching for you, Tim, he's like, oh, okay. When you look forward, whatever it is, but when you think about how to be successful moving forward, what do you think are going to be the keys for you to be successful moving forward? Coaching, general life, however you want to answer it.
I think, it's at some point this will end, obviously. But I think the key for me will be finding the purpose, and finding that connection. I am a people person. I like being around, teams. I like being around people that are working towards the same thing. So that will be a huge part of my life moving forward, whatever that is, whether it's coaching or working in other pursuits that align with my thoughts and my beliefs. But it will definitely involve people, and it will definitely involve, a purpose. Like I'm not going to flounder around, without I'm going to have a mission.
Yeah. When I was going to say this earlier, but I think you if I bring the conversation from 5 minutes to go to that, you have a very, you said this, you're very, very content, right? And I think it's so important to not misunderstand that contentness does not mean do nothing, right? Content means you're not going to be not on a mission. You actually said the exact opposite, because you said you're very content because you're clear on what the mission is you're on. Content does not mean lack of courage. Content means I'm content with what I'm doing because I strongly believe I'm doing the right thing, not I'm content because I'm doing nothing or I'm making my life as easy as possible. Like that's not the goal. The goal is be content with the mission you're on. I think that's what I heard. I don't know how you feel about that, but.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, it doesn't, you can just look around, like it's not money. You can have some of the richest people in the world that are just miserable. Some
Right.
of them, commit suicide or
Right.
drug themselves, so like they're obviously not content. So,
Right.
it's got to be what, like I said, I think it goes back to those three questions, Phil. You have to answer those three questions.
Yep. I love it. Tim, thanks so much. If you look at your, mentors, you mentioned your coach. I know your dad was extremely influential on you. If you think about either mentors or just a really impactful book or anything that you've read, where would you point people maybe that they could, go on this journey to get better at what they're doing?
Yeah, that's good. And this answer would change, depending on, because I always have books on my shelf. I'm at my office at school right now, and like I always keep books around. So like if I don't have anything on my plate, and my job is a job of being interrupted, right?
Yes.
That's basically my job. But like I'm always reading little snippets, always trying to catch something. So I mean, this answer, if you ask me this in a month from now, it might be different. Some of it. I mean, obviously, my dad was a huge influence, and the people that I have surrounded myself with, and I'm 53 years old, Phil, and I'm still influenced by the people around me. So, I would just encourage everyone to be intentional with, who you spend time with, and I don't care how old you are. But I would say if you're a coach, the biggest impact. We did a book study with Andy Lynch when he was in the area. It was called 3D Coach. I think Jeff Duke was the author. That was a great book for me. And it was, you know what it's like. Like, this is exactly how I feel or I believe, but you just said it way better than what I could ever say it. It was one of those books. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I thought this, but I could never, communicate it like you just did,
Right. 3D Coach. And I just want to reiterate the importance of just getting clear on who you spend time with. And it's clear to me that, you're hiring teachers in the process of doing that. You're bringing in coaches, and you're not like, if the coaches aren't a culture fit, if you don't think you can learn something from them in some way, shape or form, you're probably not going to hire them. Like you're surrounding yourself with people that, yes, you can mentor, you can teach, you can coach, but also there's going to be a back and forth there. So I think the power of association obviously is so important, and our listeners have heard that. So Tim, I appreciate it so much. If there's anywhere you want to direct people to find out more about you, what you're doing, anything like that.
No.
I actually, as I always ask that out of respect for the listener. And I also already was pretty sure of the answer I was going to get from Tim. He's like, I don't like the attention. I don't want it. Just let me, but for that reason, honestly, that's why I appreciate you coming on so much, because as I said earlier, when you're aligned on core values and what you're trying to do, whether you get attention or not, I do think that showing people, talking to other coaches and talking about doing things the right way, and how faith and family are the core of that, or discipline or accountability or clear expectations. Those are principles that are 2,000 years old or older. And I think the more we can be talking about those things is better for everybody. So Tim, I appreciate it so much. Thanks for coming on. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.